Hello and welcome to one of our CEM Murray 10-minute talks. My name is Louise O'Connor and I'm a Senior Associate at CEM Murray. I'm here with my colleague and our partner Merrill April, and we are here to discuss some recent developments in the US on post-termination restriction. Particularly here today, we're going to focus on non-compete. These are obviously a key area of our practice, both when we're advising senior executives and employers. We know that internationally, the law and the practice regarding these restrictions varies quite considerably. There's been some recent developments in the United States which caught your eye, which you brought to our attention recently. Could you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, thank you. I do find it really interesting, given the international nature of our practice, how different covenants are in different countries and how they're enforced and so on. So I think it was back at the beginning of the summer where our UK government had produced a sort of policy paper looking at non-competes that I think you're going to talk a bit about later, that I spotted in that context that actually the state of New York was considering completely banning non-competes. And I thought that was weird and radical because, as you know, we're used to the fact that if we're dealing with companies in California, then there are no restrictive covenants, and that's a straightforward position. And I know there are some other states where there are either limited covenants or none. But given that New York is a financial center, given that the companies we deal with there are hedge funds, banks, insurance companies, and the senior execs that work in those kind of places, it struck me that this would be really quite radical because it's almost industry standard for those kind of businesses to have covenants, and some of them quite long, especially where they've got complex carry schemes, there's a lot of money at stake. So yeah, it really did catch my eye. And then I saw a statistic, I think, that said about 40% of New York's workplaces would be affected by this non-compete ban if it came into force.
Very significant numbers at play there. And it does sound certainly like quite a radical proposal from New York.
Yeah, and would you mind just sort of telling us what is actually proposed?
Absolutely. So it's interesting, as you say, that New York is proposing this sweeping total non-compete ban for employees at all levels in all sectors. Obviously, as you say, that's contrasted with some other states where there is a partial ban, so that they are seeking to make sure that low earners are not caught at all, but that senior employees can still be restricted. This is, as we say, quite different in that it's a complete restriction across all sectors and would impact all employees. And perhaps unsurprisingly, and for some of the reasons you've touched on there, there's been some fierce opposition to this bill. What I found particularly interesting is that this opposition is not just coming from Wall Street. I read that the Public Policy Institute of the state of New York has just recently announced the launch of a very significant media advertising campaign, which they say is designed to educate New Yorkers on the economic risks of banning these non-compete agreements. The Public Policy Institute is a non-profit affiliate of the Business Council of New York State. And their educational campaign is backed and indeed championed by small local business as well as global industry leaders. They say that New Yorkers need to be aware that this ban on non-compete agreements could have potentially devastating effects on the state's jobs recovery. And what they are foreshadowing is that this bill would upset the balance between protecting business investment and creating a competitive job market. And they are warning that if enacted, this will cause employers to ship jobs to states like Florida and Texas that do not have similar laws. And so it's interesting that there's quite significant opposition across the board on that. So I don't know, we will have to wait and see about the impact of that opposition. I suppose taking that into account and looking at the passage of this bill, how likely do you think it is that this will become law?
That is so interesting, isn't it? Whilst from a weather perspective, you might wish to go to Texas or more particularly Florida. Um, yeah, that sounds like kind of a lot of scaremongering and would really worry people. So that is the big question, isn't it? How likely is it to become law? And so far, I've not been able to see anything. I guess nobody knows the mind of Governor Hochul. And my understanding is that she only has until the end of the year, 31st December, to make up her mind, and it's still sitting on her desk. It's also bizarre from a UK perspective to have a sort of public policy campaign about a law. It's hard to imagine that in the UK and the impact that that will have. But one would think it would have some impact. My guess, I think, if pushed, and this is real absolute guess, is that if it does come into law, it would be a modified version of the bill. Because as you said already, it's a very plain vanilla bill. It's a very blunt instrument. It seems to cover all employees, not just senior employees, all types of covenants, even in shareholder schemes and sale of business transactions. And that just seems to me probably to be unrealistic, particularly for a state like New York.
I think that's right. And I think you can obviously see what they're trying to, what the object of this bill is and what they're proposing to do. But I think it's quite arguable that it would, in its current form, go further than it is necessary in some ways, but also is not tailored enough to what it's trying to achieve. So I think I'd be inclined to agree with you that it's some modified form of it may be likely to come in, but we've been given no real indication so far. It's at the last step, as I understand, which is waiting to be signed into law, but no
Yeah,
indication as to when or if that will occur.
exactly. And I think as well as, employees feeling vulnerable because they're wondering, are we going to lose our jobs or have to move to Florida? I think employers also feel vulnerable because if they're paying out lots of money in carry schemes and other, significant incentives, and then employees can just join a competitor straight away, that really affects their whole business model. And I think some of the employers that we advise might be looking to review their remuneration structures, seek to amend even for existing executives. But I do think it's important to say that non-competes are not the be all and end all. There obviously are other suites of restrictions such as non-solicitation of clients, non-poaching of key employees, and indeed non-disclosure agreements that protect confidential information. And all of those are unaffected or would be unaffected by any of these type of laws that are just purely focused on non-competes.
I think that's very important to remember, as you say, even just speaking about post-termination restrictions, this is just one of the many that we see. And as you say, this doesn't impact things like non-solicit, non-deal, obviously former employees' obligations to protect confidential information. All of those are unaffected. We are purely talking about non-compete. But as you say, I can understand why employers would welcome some clarity regarding this. It certainly could change some of their approach going forward, particularly with these schemes. And as you say, the significant amount of compensation that's potentially tied up in them. So yes, I think
Yeah,
everyone would probably welcome a little bit of clarity on that.
yeah, but and just to wrap up, Louise, just what about the UK? What's happening there, and how do the plans that we're looking at in New York compare to the UK government plans?
Well, and that's very interesting. So the UK government, there's been quite a lot of discussion about this here in recent times, and they have recently announced proposals to limit the duration of non-compete clauses to 3 months. Now, importantly, in the UK, this proposal will only apply to employment and worker contracts. So the use of such clauses will not be restricted in other contracts, such as shareholder agreements, management equity plans, etc. Obviously, this contrasts with the FTC proposals, which would apply to those schemes as well. So that at least makes that bit clearer. However, there are lots of things we still don't know about the UK position, and the main thing we don't know is when this will take effect. The government has only told us so far that the necessary legislation will be introduced when parliamentary time allows, which really doesn't tell us very much. We also don't know whether it is intended that these proposals would apply retrospectively to existing non-competes. And so it's all quite up in the air to an extent. It is not planned to change the laws to bring UK in line with many other jurisdictions, including European jurisdictions, where an employer is required to remunerate the employee, whether that be their full remuneration or partial remuneration for the duration of these restricted covenants, such as non-compete. So it's very much watch this space in the UK as well at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I think that is true, that what that reflects is that the UK government has had a number of attempts at looking at reform in this area. We've had a couple of consultation papers. Now we've got this policy statement. And it's really very difficult at this juncture to know whether there's a political will to make changes, and if so, what kind of changes will happen. But what we do know is that some of the points you've raised and flagged there about remuneration and so on are absolutely pertinent to any changes that are made in this area. So thank you.
Thank you, Merrill. That's been a really interesting discussion. I think there's some very interesting things underway, but there's still lots of unknowns. At this stage, it's very much a case of watch this space and see what happens next. We will be looking out for any further developments and will, of course, keep you all updated. Thank you for listening.